Hello, friends! I am back once again to read from Dark World Light Work. We are reading 48, 49, and 50. That is the Simulation Theory, The Never-Ending Red Eye, and a Slight Upgrade. So let's get right to it. Simulation Theory. Tony and I hung out in the parking lot as the sun went down. About an hour or so after eating the shroom, I noticed my vision getting clearer. By the time it was dark outside, my vision was sharp. I could see as clearly in the dark as when the sun was up. I kept mentioning how everything looked like it did when I was in high school. It was wild. I hadn't noticed a decline in my vision since then, but I was 39 at the time, so it made sense. As everything got sharper and crisper, my head felt fresher and lighter. My brain felt younger in the same way my eyes did. I was impressed. I could feel my neurological system repairing itself somehow. I could almost hear the nerve endings communicating with each other again for the first time in years. As the sacred chemicals did their work on this weary avatar, I sat in the car giving Tony a verbal play-by-play of what was going on in my system. I wish that I could have given written details in real time, but I was loopy. I reported my findings to Tony until we both got tired. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital parking lot as usual. I always washed up before we headed to the park so that Clem and I could walk immediately. It took me about 20 minutes. Everything was average at the start of the day. When we got to the lot, Tony hadn't arrived yet. I took my usual spot under the awning and got Clem ready. As soon as I stepped out from under the covering, the sun hit my eyes. That's when the real trip began. I could literally feel my pupils dilate. My brain was awake. I was alert and very aware of every single atom in the universe. It was fantastic. I glanced up at a tree. I could clearly make out each leaf dancing in the breeze. I'd never seen anything like it in person. The edges were clear and so sharp. The tree looked like it was a cartoon. It looked digital, downright electric. My mind was singing. The leaves filled me with so much joy that I started laughing uncontrollably. The smile on my face was huge. I could feel the chemicals being released into my bloodstream every time I turned the corners of my mouth up. I was elated. Everything was wondrous. I could see the indentation that a tree or a lamppost makes in the sky. The air is made up of particles. They have matter that is not normally visible to the human eye. I could see how this matter was displaced by the trees. It was marvelous. That kind of vision isn't average, but it is possible. I was in awe. I remember having a vision like this once before. It wasn't from a mushroom trip. When Clem and I were on our journey, we spent a morning at Red Rock Canyon. As we were hiking, I spotted a mountain that was absolutely electric. The formation and colors were unlike anything I'd ever seen. In one blink, the resolution was turned up in the whole canyon. I could not believe my eyes. The formation had many layers. Each represented a different time in the Earth's history. The color of the layers represented the minerals that were most abundant on the Earth at the time. The edges of every little thing were so sharp that I could see individual grains of sand at my feet as I walked. The mountains were crisp and clear. Each one looked like it was zoomed in. I was standing at the base of these giant mountains of Earth, but I could see clearly all the way to the top. It was magnificent. I laughed and oohed and awed for at least 2 hours as we made our way through the canyon. Clem and I both took the time to stop and smell the flowers that day. We were both catapulted by our superpowers, Clem's nose and my eyes. By the time we got back on the road, my vision slowly began to fade. I thought about this extraordinary experience for several years. I kept trying to figure out what caused the visuals. I assumed it was the energy of the land itself. In the present day, I was eager to ooh and awe again. Clementine and I set on our routine walk. On this day, it took us 4.5 hours. We stopped to inspect everything. I could see the fine dusting of pollen on the antenna of a bee in high definition. My vision and brain could finally keep up with the speed of a hummingbird's wings. I could make out each individual hair that made up Clementine's fur. It was like I stepped into one of those fancy televisions at a big box store. I've never been so amazed in my entire life. When Tony arrived, I went on and on about how I'd been blessed with a miracle. I was floating beyond the clouds. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. I am a superhero. I'm the main character, and this is my origin story. The best part is that as far as I can tell, my superpower is only beneficial to myself. Very on brand. I pontificated for at least 20 minutes. You finally got the visuals. Good stuff. Gotta love when the leaves are dancing. He laughed. Okay. The next chapter is called The Never-Ending Red Eye.
The best way to describe living in a car is to compare it to a long-haul red-eye travel. The discomfort that comes from trying to rest in a cramped seat, the torture of trying to sleep in a metal tube surrounded by strangers doing their business, the fact that I have been both privileged enough to travel overseas for leisure and also unfortunate enough to have lived in a car gives me a unique perspective on life in general. I slept in my car for more than a year before I discovered that I could fold the back seats down to make a somewhat flat sleeping surface. I remember the first morning that I woke up after sleeping almost horizontally and almost stretched out in the back seat. It was a major upgrade. I felt alert and awake again. The difference in my mental state was like night and day. Between the uncomfortable sleeping position, the noise, and the light coming in, I could never get sufficient rest. I was rarely able to maintain REM sleep or complete an entire sleep cycle. Once we woke up, there was no rest. Like wild animals, Clem and I were both constantly going. One of the main themes of my life has been, how can I avoid being part of the world? I'd been looking to exit for years. I tried sleeping it off. I danced with death. Now I was set apart in the wilderness. I left everyone I knew and all of my things. I started a new journey in another life, but I never expected this very dark time to last for as long as it did. Imagine nearly 5 years on a never-ending red eye. Consider the logistics involved in changing a tampon in the back or front seat of a car in public. I am a poet, and even I cannot find an appealing way to properly express the dehumanizing trauma. I went from being sequestered for most of my life to being overexposed in an instant. I went from Rapunzel with much less hair to a literal Truman Show if Truman was forced to live in a Mercedes. I looked at the whole thing like a test. Could I survive isolation? Could I manage being wanted, ostracized, and exiled? Could I contend with the elements, God and man, without losing sight of my goal? Would I remember the love when times got tough? Could I remain grateful in the midst of repeated loss? My goal was not only to survive, but to thrive. To thrive for me means continued evolution. Success is to keep going come what may. Adapt, transmute, enjoy, give thanks, repeat. All the other animals in creation understand this by nature, but humans have a lot more going on intellectually. Humans are forged in the image of a god. With great power comes great responsibility. Living on the street, I experienced many firsts. The first time that I peed in my car was more because I could rather than out of necessity. I purchased a party-sized can of almost expired toffee peanuts from a grocery outlet and promptly polished off the entire container in a few hours. The next morning when I woke up, I had to pee. Normally, I would have held it in until I drove to the nearest gas station, but today I realized I had an empty, sealed container in the car. I figured if I could get used to peeing in the car, it would take a tremendous amount of stress out of my already chaotic day. It took me several minutes of strategizing before I squatted over the container. The smell of toffee and the knowledge that the scent would soon be intersecting with human urine was unsettling. I almost, and I mean almost, underestimated the amount of urine that can be produced by the human body. The jar quickly filled to the brim. I was certain it was going to overflow. By some measure of grace, the fluid stopped just shy of the top. A few errant splashes misted my hand for good measure. The only time I'd ever been this intimately involved with my urine was for medical purposes, and back then I had access to a washroom. I snapped the lid on and stuck the can into a snug spot in the back seat of my car. I ended up forgetting about it for several days. We were driving up the Pacific Coast Highway when my car backfired somewhere near Malibu. When I got out at the gas station to look under the hood, I remembered the pee. I grabbed the canister and tossed it into a nearby dumpster. As the metal met this dumpster floor, I heard a loud clang, then a boom. At that moment, I said a secret prayer that the jar stayed closed. I did not want my stale, dehydrated urine baking in the midday sun at the bottom of a dumpster. And in Malibu, of all places, I could not. I had no idea what was going on out there. I was new to the streets and unaware of the debauchery that goes on in California. I didn't pee in the car again until the 2020 lockdowns when I had no other choice. By the end of the year, I was used to it. Alrighty, now we are going to read from A Slight Upgrade. I noticed a slight upgrade in my car's performance thanks to premium fuel and all the work that I had done. It wasn't enough to make us freeway ready, but I felt like I could make the drive out of Huntington Beach to nearby cities comfortably. I was desperate to get away from the towers, so we took the PCH away from Huntington towards Newport Beach. Looking back, it was very foolish. The car was in no shape for me to be flying down the Pacific Coast Highway daily, but I did so every day for 2 years. Oh, was I brave or crazy? I'd say a fair bit of both. Newport had very few 5G towers placed in residential areas, and the library was closer to the ocean. This helps to disperse some of the electromagnetic energy, and it gave us a great deal of relief. Each night, we slept in the parking lot of the hospital where I had my neck surgery. Their lot was much cleaner, quieter, and safer than the one in Huntington. Each morning, I would drive 6 miles from the hospital to Huntington Planet Fitness, where I worked out and took a shower. By this time, at least an hour-long workout at the gym was part of my daily routine. After the gym, Clem and I would go for a walk on the beach or at a park in Costa Mesa. We would then head to the Newport Library where we'd park in the garage for the day. Most days, we didn't even go inside in the building. The whole trip was just over 26 miles. In the evenings, Clem and I would walk around the Newport Civic Center or a nearby mall. The most beautiful part of the day was our view of the ocean from a lookout point on our path. All right, so that was 48, 49, and 50, I hope. A simulation theory, the never-ending red eye, and a slight upgrade. And next, we are going to be reading from 51, 52, 53, and that is Racism is an Inferiority Complex, The Lincoln Project, and Not an Escape. So I hope you're enjoying this, and I will see you soon.